there's a candidate, a first candidate that starts embodying these sorts of, slogans, they'll select them over a populace that might be better economically for the working people of their country.
Yes, Hernandez was going to be better economically for the working people of Colombia. Yeah, that's a fair and astute thing. The guy who said Hitler is all right, actually, is probably going to do a good job. The wealthy 77-year-old failed actor, failed comedian, businessman, the rich-ass tycoon is going to come in and save everyone's lives because he cares about the poor people, compared to someone who literally was a guerrilla fighter fighting for the poor people in the country. Let's just get Jackson on the screen so I can cover his face, because he has been banned on this platform. Perfect.
A coconut.
My goddaughter is Colombian.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here we go. Gustavo Petro wins the election, becoming Colombia's first leftist leader. The former rebel and longtime senator's victory sets the third largest nation in Latin America on a sharply new path. Wow. Wow. How bad does a right-wing government have to screw up? For the first time, Colombia will have a leftist president. Gustavo Petro, a former rebel and a longtime legislator, won Colombia's presidential election on Sunday, galvanizing voters frustrated by decades of poverty and inequality under conservative leaders, with promises to expand social programs, tax the wealthy, and move away from an economy that he called overly reliant on fossil fuels. How bad does a right-wing government have to screw up for a former leftist rebel to win a free election for the first time in Colombian history? How bad? Well, his victory sets the third largest nation in... Oh, we already did that, right? High levels of deforestation in the Colombian Amazon, a key buffer against climate change, and a growing distrust of key democratic institutions.
The New York Times is a source Jimmy trusts. Well, it depends what they're talking about. Yeah, it depends on the content. Sometimes it's just shitlib, neoliberal, imperial core propaganda, but then other times it's just the news.
Which has become a trend in the region. Oh, here it is. His victory sets the third largest nation in Latin America on a sharply uncertain path, just as it faces rising poverty and violence that have sent record numbers of Colombians to the United States border.
I didn't know Colombia was doing on that.
Well, I'm pretty sure it has to do with the drug war. So a lot of people, when you get a lot of immigrants coming to the United States, it's because the United States is enforcing a drug war. And so what that does is the drug cartels arm themselves and then they gang violence all the time.
You have war refugees, basically.
So then it's basically, yeah, so it's basically a narco war. And then just like you have war refugees from Syria and Afghanistan and Libya and Iraq and now Ukraine, now we have those refugees of the drug war. That's what this is. That's what a lot of it is. And then a lot of it is economics, which is also imposed on it by the neoliberals and the capitalists in the United States. Petro has pledged to govern with what he has called the politics of love, based on hope, dialogue, and understanding. So look for him to be quickly deposed in a coup.
Yeah, he's as good as... That's a big target.
That's do you don't want to get that? Why don't you just shoot a flare into the CIA building? What are you doing?
This hasn't been
okay,
off yet.
Go ahead, Jackson.
This guy, there's been this wave of leftists that have been elected in Latin America who all condemn Venezuela, condemn Nicaragua, say that their elections are bogus, whatever. This guy's VP is funded by Sweden, USAID, Ford Foundation. So there are some sus things here that I think, we should keep an eye out on.
Interesting take to start out with. So the VP happens to be black, as well as a worker. She was a maid in Colombia and faced a large amount of racism in the country during the election campaign cycle, as well as people straight up saying, we don't want a maid to be the vice president of this country. But apparently also funded heavily by a lot of other outside sussy sources.
So if you're looking for a wet blanket in Colombia right now, Jackson Hinkle just provided it, if you want to know. No, that is true. So we're going to get to that part. He makes good points, okay. Of course. I'm teasing. Last year, Chile, Peru, and Honduras voted for leftists. Oh, there it is. That's what Jackson was just talking about. He was talking for leftist leaders running against candidates on the right, extending significant multi-year shift across Latin America. But what's the problem?
That's not what Jackson was talking about. What? Jackson was saying that a whole bunch of these people were also shitting on other leftist countries, the ones that apparently there's good ones and bad ones, and so these people were also going after Venezuela.
There is a problem. So last year, Chile, Peru, and Honduras voted for leftist leaders running against candidates on the right. And oh man, and here, the United States, we just punched ourselves in the dick with the stupid sanctions and we got a war with China scheduled. This couldn't have come at a worse time.
It's not convenient for us.
It really isn't. And by the way, to a degree, this includes Nicaragua also. Wouldn't you say, Jackson? It also includes Nicaragua. Yes, it does.
Nicaragua.
Why are you pronouncing it like that? The fuck?
Whose elections, according to Mike Pompeo, are illegitimate.
Yeah. So Mr. Petro's win is all the more significant because of the country's history. For decades, the government fought a brutal leftist insurgency known as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, with the stigma from the conflict making it difficult for... So there was a brutal far leftist insurgency that were violent, and they were known as FARC, and they were armed. And they made it impossible for any kind of dialogue to happen or any kind of legitimate left to flourish. Not to mention...
Wait, what? Oh, wow. Oh, man, we're going to have a little history lesson here. So, yeah, there was a civil war that took place in Colombia that lasted many, many years, and FARC was the guerrilla faction that formed. It was a collaboration of leftist groups, far-left groups, and their initial proposals were that they were going to fight on the behalf of the poor. That was their mandate, to fight. They were, open communists, and they were going to fight on the behalf of the poorest Colombians in order to restore the country to the people. That was their mandate. Now, obviously, in a civil war, especially one that has guerrilla fighters, there's going to be a lot of fucked up shit that goes down. FARC was labeled as a terrorist organization by the United States, by Europe, by a number of other countries, and also said that they were very heavily invested in the cocaine trade. Now, FARC pushes back against those accusations as propaganda, stating that they weren't directly responsible for the cocaine trade, but instead were doing a system of taxation, or extortion as they called it, on cocaine growers. So in a lot of the regions where there is large amounts of coca leaves that are produced, those are regions that are controlled by the guerrilla faction itself. Their fighting was sustained for such a long time to such a degree that the far-right CIA-backed government, by the way, CIA-backed bombing missions as well on the guerrilla fighters that were taking place. Again, if you are trying to say that you're anti-imperialist and not a neoliberal and not a shit lib and all that kind of stuff, you should be able to point that out. Because they were capable of sustaining the war for so long, they were actually brought to the negotiation table and were able to negotiate with the existing government itself. That's something that was only accomplished through, again, years and years of brutal guerrilla warfare and civil war. Now, the fucked up thing about all this, though, is that, yes, while there is no question that FARC has not committed a series of atrocities, including kidnappings, including child soldiers. They had a recruitment age, I think they said at 15. International observations on child soldiers cut off, saying that it should not be younger than 18 to participate in stuff. There's no question that they've done fucked up things and that there is a rap sheet. On the other hand, if you look at the far-right government and the far-right paramilitaries, they committed even more atrocities than the guerrilla fighters who were trying to fight, quote, on the behalf of the people did during this event.
The stigma of your name sounding like fart. You know what I mean? And by the way, in Colombia,
I was about to say, I bet he's gonna make a fart joke, but I was like, no, even Jimmy Dore is not gonna be that immature to think, oh, well, I got an easy one here. Here's a softball. Time to tee it up.
Brutal kidnappings. Brutal means kidnappings. That's what brutal. When they say brutal, they mean kidnappings, torture, landmines. That's what they mean by brutal leftists. Unlike brutal leftists here in America, where you're not a brutal leftist till you dye your hair blue. That's different. it's different down there.
Yeah, it's funny because the left in America are social justice warriors and also LGBTQ plus, and so they're funny.
Brutal leftist does some real brutal shit. Okay. But the FARC signed a peace deal with the government in 2016, laying down their arms and opposing space for a broader political discourse. Mr. Petro has been part of a different rebel group. So the guy who just became president used to be in a rebel group, but it was called the M19, which demobilized in 1999 and became a political party that helped rewrite the country's constitution. So he was no longer a rebel. That means you're a mainstream MFer. He was part of a rebel group that demilitarized in 1990 and helped rewrite the country's constitution. So he's not a rebel at this point. He's just a legitimate candidate who won an election, right? The win could also test the United States' relationship with its strongest ally in Latin America. Traditionally, Colombia has formed the cornerstone of Washington's policy in the region. But Mr. Petro, it's like,
I feel like he goes a little Beto O'Rourke anytime he wants to pronounce one of these countries' names, and all of a sudden he just like ramps it up. Like I don't know where that Nicaragua stuff was coming from and why he had to do it like 3 or 4 times. I feel like he should just have some Spanish 101, you know? Escúcheme, amigos, pero por un momento yo hablo en español porque es una situación muy complicada. Yo quiero explicar que es una situación que tienes muchas cosas peligroso, pero al momento no puedo hablar como compañeros y estudiar esta situación. And then all of a sudden be like, on Colombia?
that's how I feel like I'm calling him Mr. Gasoline. But Mr. Petro has...
Me too.
Doesn't it feel like that? Hey, what's up, Mr. Gasoline?
12-year-olds. Petro is like petroleum, so his name's Mr. Gas. Do you get it? Fark sounds like fart, so we're going to say fart. That's fun.
Mr. Petro has criticized what he calls the United States' failed approach to the drug war. That's what we're talking about. Saying it was focused too much on eradication as a cocoa crop, the base product in cocaine, and not enough on rural development and other measures. Wow. Looks like somebody's not going to be invited to next year's Summit of the Americas. Am I right? Am I right?
You're probably right.
Be on the outs with Juan Guaido.
Mr. Petro has said he embraces some form of drug legalization, that he will renegotiate an existing trade deal with the United States to better benefit Colombians, and that he will restore relations with the authoritarian, I like how they call it in the New York Times, the authoritarian government of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. The authoritarian government.
We're actually exactly on the same page for this one. That's fucking clown shoes.
He's just a socialist. That's all. He actually rises the poor out of poverty and gives them health care and housing. That's called an authoritarian to them. That's the New York Times, baby. Yeah. So by authoritarian regime, they mean one that imprisons political opponents and cracks down on peaceful protesters while poverty, unemployment, and inflation rise. Stay in your lane, Maduro. That's what they mean. Okay.
Okay. I just want to get to their commentary on this. I hear they had some spicy takes.
Correspondence dinner. Am I right? Come on. Come on. He also said he's going to introduce guaranteed work with basic income, move the country to a publicly controlled health system, and increase access to higher education, in part by raising taxes on the elite. Why don't you just put a target on your chest? Yeah, really. Why don't you just put a target so it makes it easier for the...
It's funny because we think you'll be assassinated.
He also said he's going to introduce guaranteed work with basic income. This is what Israel does.
His platform sounds incredibly based.
It's all over the world. So there,
Gustavo Petro better not go home with any hookers that approach him, because that's going to be a Mossad honey trap.
Yeah, that is right. That is a honey trap. So let me just get to this part. Not to sound like such a downer. Okay, here we go. This is what Jackson was talking about earlier.
Okay, here we go.
This is Jose Marti. Hello, Jose Marti. He tweeted out, not to sound like such a downer, but Lenin Moreno, Pedro Castillo, and Gabriel.
It's funny because it's a different sounding name than American names, and I guess it might be Latin, so that's funny too.
Gabriel Boric are all reasons to be cautiously ambivalent towards Gustavo Petro. Now, he's talking about the current president, the former president of Peru, the current president of Ecuador, and the current president of Chile, all of whom were elected as leftists, but were very disappointing. They followed a neoliberal agenda. Is that
okay? Well, first off, the current president of Chile has not really been in power for that long, so to say that he's enacted a neoliberal agenda would be a bit of a short-sighted comment, to say the very least.
What you're talking about, Jackson?
Yeah, what I'm talking about is this guy and his administration, his lackeys, are funded by the same arms that are backed by George Soros. You look at USAID and the Ford Foundation.
We already have a George Soros. Oh, wow. That was fast. Yeah, I mean, apparently Soros is just funding operations globally. He's also pretty much in control of Ukraine. I've also heard that. Also interesting.
Ushering in woke ideology into Latin America. And they're
woke ideology into Latin America. Holy fuck.
Saying no to the idea of nationalizing their oil and yes to the idea of legalizing drug trades with the United States. And also, the biggest thing, this is the most important part, they want to decrease Chinese investment into Latin America. That's the main underpinning behind all of it.
Yeah, because they're doing their Belt and Road Initiative, right? So United States, if it wants to get your natural resources, it overthrows your government and then installs a puppet government, right? Like Zelensky is a puppet, like the Shah was in Iran for all those years.
Again, like some of the biggest problems with the clown shoes left is, and I've stated this before, they take things that are historically accurate, that have been proven, and then they'll pepper in their own version of modern day conspiracies, using the other ones as a basis for justifying it. Alex Jones does this extremely strongly to such a degree that you can see through it very easily. So if he's just like, MK Ultra was basically a program by the CIA, and it's because of that that they're now trying to implant chips into our brains via the vaccines and all this kind of stuff, you can be like, okay, well, yeah, this is gobbledygook. But again, Jimmy Dore does this frequently, where it's like, here's something you know to be true, here's another thing you know to be true, and now here's a third thing where it's just going to be a conspiracy theory that we're all buying into. If you want to look at the history of Colombia and China, China has for a while been an increasingly friendly partner with Colombia for a variety of reasons, including China was one of the countries that Colombia turned to for aid under the pandemic. So China was one of the countries that was supplying them with millions of dollars of masks, of vaccines, of testing kits, stuff like that. And that is all true, as well as China has had trade relations with Colombia for some time now, and that includes a variety of resources that they buy from the country. If you have a far leftist government coming into power, and that far leftist government is talking about things primarily, and this is what Gustavo Petro has been talking about not actually expanding the oil industry specifically in that country. Not what Jackson is talking about, which is not to nationalize oil or stuff like that, but not to increase oil production in an attempt to work towards a greener future. That's pretty much been the key of what Gustavo Petro has been proposing. And if he enacts that, I mean, it would be a very good thing, but also a complicated thing because, again, some of the key exports of Colombia happen to be oil and coal. That being said, I don't know if he's going to enact it or not. We'll see. But it also goes towards the fact that I don't know what Jackson's sources are on that statement he just made about China, because I was Googling it earlier and there wasn't really a lot of stuff outside of RT and some other kind of things like that. But when it comes to them maybe softening relationships with China or saying that they don't want to do an increased amount of trade with China, which again hasn't been publicly stated by Gustavo Petro or his administration, we will see if that's going to be something that he wants to do. That is not indicative of anything related to what they're talking about right now. Like if a country is like, we don't want to have to do either more expropriation of oil in our country, and we don't want to have to do further mining, we don't want to have to increase that for the benefit of much richer nations, much more powerful nations such as China or the United States, well, then that would just be a country's sovereign decision to be made. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're not leftists if they don't do trade with China or they don't increase trade with China. I don't see how that works.
I wonder who's in charge in Libya now. I'm sure it's a puppet.
What refinery capacity is? I don't know that.
Gaddafi's son is running for president right now in Libya.
Really?
Yeah. But as for this, I could be wrong for all I know. I don't know. I don't live there. But we'll only time will tell, you know?
Yeah, so fingers crossed. I didn't know that about his vice president and the people running with him, that they were all being funded by the same old shifty neoliberals.
But where are the sources? Can you give us like anything? Just something? You have the technology. I've seen you put articles up on the screen. I just want to know. Like, can we read about that? Can we read about how George Soros has been privately funding the vice president's election campaign? How Sweden apparently has been privately funding the vice president's election campaign? Get anything at all outside of just, I'm gonna make a statement out loud now and hope it sticks?
I didn't know that part, but I know that the recent history, of places like Peru, Chile, Ecuador, they've all started like this, then they all ended like Obama. Mm-hmm. So remember how excited we were in 2008 when Obama got elected? We were all so excited, and then by 2012 we were like, oh shit.
Yeah, there was a guy, another candidate, Hernandez, who was running for president in Colombia, and he was a populist who wanted to nationalize Colombia's oil industry and work closer with China and investing in industrializing Colombia. And he was seriously out fundraised by the likes of the now president-elect.
So you're saying the real lefty got left behind, right? He didn't get as much funding. The guy who's the real lefty, of course, didn't get the funding. The guy who's the faux lefty, looks like you're saying, got all the funding, and he became president.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing that happened in Chile with Boric as well.
So here's what they're talking about. Colombian mayor who called Hitler a great German thinker could be the country's next president. When John Claro, an opposition councillor in the Colombian city of Bucaramanga, had a disagreement with the local mayor over a colleague's misconduct, he was left with a red face and a ringing in his ear. In a video of the incident, the mayor can be seen quickly losing his temper, rising to his feet, and unleashing a stream of profanities. Then he steps forward and slaps Claro hard in the face. The mayor was Rodolfo Hernandez, who on Sunday said he could be elected president of Colombia. It seems to me that he is not mentally well, Claro told The Guardian. I consider him to be a sociopath. Hernandez, a 77-year-old businessman, likes to offend. He routinely releases foul-mouthed diatribes on social media, has admitted to not knowing much of Colombia, and once described Adolf Hitler as a great German thinker. He has claimed that the idea would be for women to dedicate themselves to raising their children, and called Venezuelan women factories of poor children. He was initially written off as an oddball outsider, but last month shocked the country by making it through Sunday's runoff election, where he will face Gustavo Petro, former urban guerrilla, and what has been portrayed as a battle of outsiders. Hernandez shares traits with the region's growing gallery of personal populists like El Salvador's Nayib Bukele, and has used social media, in his case TikTok, to reach undecided voters. Like Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, he revels in crass political incorrectness. Like Donald Trump, he has a history of business and dubious comb-over and a platform that is strong on emotion but lacking in detail. You can compare Hernandez to Louis XIV, the French king who said the state is me. He says what people want to hear. He's erratic, he's a demagogue, he's tongue-in-cheek, he's rude, and he's a mythomaniac. Should Petro win, he would become the first leftist president in a country where most of the last century political power has involved power-sharing pacts between the right and the center-right. But Petro, former mayor of Bogota, has also accused of high-handedness, and his personal history alienates many in conservative country, where the left has strong been tarred by association with many guerrilla groups and has battled state forces with their paramilitary allies for decades. While Petro was a front-runner for most of the campaign and took in 40% of the first round, many of his opponents are now expected, blah, blah, blah. The guy is a fucking wealthy 77-year-old business rich-ass motherfucker. This is not the actual leftist. This is one of the most clown shoes things that these three, and I'm going to say these two specifically, and Hinkle the most, have ever proposed. Ever. Like, that is absolutely ludicrous. I couldn't imagine having I don't even know where you start to get this kind of fucking information.
No es así.
Leftist shit.
That's where identity politics comes into play in the United States, is that they'll fake you out. They'll give you a Pete Buttigieg who's just Mitch McConnell but gay.
Yeah, and with Soros.
Yeah, and we can't forget about Soros. We got to talk about Soros a little bit more. Of course, Soros plays a big role in all of this. All right, I'll let him finish.
What he's been doing is he's creating all these higher level institutions, college campuses across the world, and he brings in this sort of like woke ideology to countries that don't have it and acclimates their youth towards this progressive social mindset. So this is just 100% far-right conspiratorial nonsense coming out right now. Anti-Semitic conspiratorial nonsense. The fact that George Soros, and yes, it's 100% to the George Soros Foundation, can create and fund universities, but the idea that these are being made specifically to be able to indoctrinate kids into woke ideology, whatever that means. It's kind of a nebulous term that changes every time they talk about it. And then to compare this election to an American election or the corporate Democrats, because that's the only way I guess Jimmy Dore knows how to view the world, is also super fucked up. But like, you couldn't be more off on all of this assertion. There's a first candidate that starts embodying these sorts of, slogans. They'll select them over a populist that might be better economically for the working people of their country.
Yes, Hernandez was going to be better economically for the working people of Colombia. Yeah, that's a fair and astute thing. The guy who said Hitler is all right, actually, is probably going to do a good job. The fucking wealthy 77-year-old failed actor, failed comedian, businessman, the rich-ass tycoon is going to come in and save everyone's lives because he cares about the poor people, compared to someone who literally was a guerrilla fighter fighting for the poor people in the country.
Exactly right.
Anti-imperialist, by the way.
So let's hope that this is not what happened. Let's try to wish President Petro, all the luck in the world, and somehow he'll be able to resist the neoliberal capitalists who want to, not do.
How can you do both things in the same breath? How can you talk about this on one end and have like a half the segment about being how the CIA is probably going to assassinate him, lol, fart, and then move into this where it's like, oh, okay, so what happened here was that the actual leftist, who happens to be the Hitler was good actually guy, that dude was the real leftist, and then we've been fooled and duped by neoliberal policies into thinking the person who's the leftist is actually not the leftist. Got it.
All the stuff he says he wants to do. But yeah, if he can resist them, they're in his own cabinet, so it's going to be hard. Anyway, there you go. Fingers crossed. Maybe someday.
I just wanted to pull a source that I didn't think Jackson Hinkle could refute, because at the end of the day, he's, I think, a big fan of China. But this is from the Chinese government state-funded CGTN on the Colombia guerrilla group FARC.
In the past, in daily meetings, they would discuss military strategy. They would teach war. But now, as negotiations with the government advance, they're teaching a new generation of guerrillas how to live in peace.
The FARC says it is holding these peace classes every day, teaching politics, geography, mathematics, a new set of skills for a Colombia in peace. This addresses a widespread fear that following the peace process, thousands of unemployed fighters could turn to the drug business or become killers for hire, as happened in previous Colombian peace deals. Federico says the FARC will remain united.
No, porque nosotros somos una organización política. Es decir, nosotros lo que hacemos es seguir siendo lo que somos, un partido político, pero ya no con armas, ya un partido político sin armas. Entonces, como somos un partido político, pues seguimos organizados como partido político. Obedecemos a unos lineamientos de tipo político, ideológico. Entonces vamos a seguir organizados en células, vamos a seguir militando. Entonces ya no va a ser vaya busque un objetivo militar para golpear, vaya busque una patrulla para golpear, sino vaya haga una reunión, vaya a una asamblea con la comunidad de tal vereda, con la comunidad de tal municipio, vaya finca a finca, reparta estos volantes, hable con la comunidad, explíquele la necesidad de hacer un puente, explique la necesidad de hacer una carretera, explique la necesidad de construir un centro de salud, explique la necesidad de que vote por nosotros en las próximas elecciones.
Commander Byron says the government is talking peace with them because it is clear that there can be no military solution to the conflict.
Lo que ha cambiado es en primer lugar que el Estado tiene que darse cuenta que la guerrilla es inderrotable. Entonces ellos vienen dándose cuenta seguramente de eso, porque invirtieron en los últimos gobiernos de Uribe, es decir, desde el Plan Colombia, 8 años de Uribe, 4 años de Santos, intentando aniquilar al movimiento en frente, y no ha sido posible.
While the guerrillas have not been exterminated, they have taken a beating in the past decade. In 1 year alone, the FARC lost 2 of its highest commanders and its founding leader, Tiro Fijo, or in English, Sure Shot. The next leader of the FARC would last 3 years before the military killed him. Hundreds of others have been killed by aerial bombardments, destroying camps, just like this one, with help from the CIA.
What? Help from the CIA?
Pero lo que le da más tristeza aún es mirar los camaradas, los guerrilleros bombardeados. Si usted mirara un bombardeo en un campamento bombardeado, un lugar, eso queda inerte. Eso queda inerte.
Jimmy Dore
la
told me
vegetación.
differently.
Queda todo acarbonizado, mejor dicho.
Networks of trenches run through the camp, and it's an order that every guerrilla must build a personal trench by their bed.
The guerrillas have suffered so many aerial bombardments at night that they've installed these cords throughout the whole camp. With this, if there is an attack, the guerrillas, by touch alone, are not...
Oh, Georgi, you haven't learned Twitch speak yet. That's Kappa. Kappa face means it's sarcasm.
not turning on any torches, can find their way to any trenches or any exit.
They even have bunkers in their camp, so they can...
Something that was neat, I'm not going to play the whole documentary, obviously, but something that was neat to learn was that 40% of the members in their military are women. They also have, and this one was the one that really shocked me, dentists. They have an actual, in the middle of the fucking jungle little dentist stations set up to work on people's teeth, because, you know, free healthcare is obviously a big tenant in their kind of like communist revolution. All that being said, though, I'm not here to defend all the actions of a guerrilla paramilitary group, of whom I said, yes, are also involved in the drug trade, also involved in having child soldiers, and also have been involved in kidnappings and extrajudicial killings. I think it's important to get a perspective on this, though, that they are not the only one actor in a complex conflict where atrocities have been committed by the state, and especially right-wing paramilitaries. The Colombia's National Center for Historical Memory, a government agency, has estimated that between a certain period of time, the paramilitary, the far-right paramilitary groups, caused about 38.4 of civilian deaths, while the guerrillas were responsible for 16.8 in comparison, and then 27.7 were by non-identified armed groups, and then 10.1 by the Colombian security forces backed by the CIA. So, yeah, war, especially guerrilla war, civil war, it makes for atrocities, incredible atrocities. They're going to be committed all across the history of whenever this conflict begins and ends, as it often does with all conflicts like this. There's going to be atrocities committed, and it's not even a both sides thing, by the way. It's just like war is fucking brutal, and it just brings out the most fucking worst side of humanity that you can possibly imagine. That being said, of course, the United States, as well as Western allies, would see in their mind, if they are directly aligned with a far-right authoritarian government in Colombia, and this is the CIA far-right authoritarian government, to label these groups as being terrorists, and specifically label them as terrorists and terrorist organizations. And then once you have someone who comes out of one of these, not specifically FARC in this case, but who comes out, becomes a politician, and says he wants to work for the people, gets elected against, again, a 77-year-old, very, very rich, Hitler was good guy. I'm thinking the one person who spent his life dedicated to trying to fight for the liberation of his people, regardless if you think it was misguided or evil of him to do so, most likely is probably going to work a little bit more for the people of Colombia than the 77-year-old business tycoon. But we'll see. And I don't know why this one is so confusing for supposed clown shoe leftists Hinkle and Dore, but it really is.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jester, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tao, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevbot, EXE, Brian Ephraim, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.